Here's something nobody talks about. Right now in 2025, you have more self-help books, productivity apps, and motivational content at your fingertips than any generation in human history. And yet, according to recent behavioral psychology research, rates of chronic procrastination have increased by 300 to 400% since the 1970s. We're more stuck than ever. Why? Because we're fighting the wrong battle. We think our enemy is time management, or willpower, or discipline. But there's something far more dangerous lurking inside each of us, something ancient, towering, and incredibly smart about keeping us exactly where we are. Unmasking the Goliath within, conquering our modern personal giants. Today, we're going to unmask these hidden giants, and more importantly, I'm going to show you why the very thing you think is your biggest weakness might actually be the key to taking them down. But first, we need to talk about why 2025 is the year these giants became almost impossible to see. The invisible enemy. Let me tell you about Sarah. She's a composite of dozens of people I've spoken with over the past year. Brilliant, capable, educated. She starts every Monday with a color-coded planner, 3 productivity apps synced across her devices, and genuine intention to finally tackle that project she's been putting off for 6 months. By Wednesday, she's refreshing social media, reorganizing her desk for the 3rd time, and convinced she's just not disciplined enough. Sarah isn't lazy. Sarah is at war. The problem is she can't see her enemy clearly because it's wearing a disguise. It looks like laziness, feels like lack of motivation, and whispers that she's just not cut out for this. But here's what's actually happening. Sarah is facing down her own personal Goliath. And like the ancient story, this giant has spent years convincing everyone around it that it's unbeatable. Let's name these modern Goliaths specifically, because they're not all the same monster. There's procrastination, the master of disguise who convinces you that later is always better. There's self-doubt, who knows exactly which insecurities to whisper about at 2 a.m. There's fear of failure, who's gotten incredibly sophisticated at preventing you from even starting. And then there's the perfection trap, perhaps the most dangerous of all because it masquerades as ambition. Now, you might be thinking, these are just bad habits. Why are you calling them giants? Because calling them habits makes them sound manageable, fixable, with a 21-day challenge or a new morning routine. But if these were just habits, you would have fixed them by now with all that information you have access to. The truth is, these are complex psychological defense mechanisms that have evolved alongside you, learning your patterns, adapting to your strategies, and getting stronger every time you try the same old solutions. A 2024 study from the American Psychological Association found that 88% of people who set New Year's resolutions fail by February. And here's the kicker: most of them were using scientifically backed strategies. The strategies weren't wrong. They were just fighting the wrong enemy. Seeing the giant clearly. Let's pull the mask off these giants one by one, because you can't defeat what you can't clearly see. Procrastination first. Everyone thinks it's about laziness or poor time management, but Dr. Tim Pitchell, who's spent decades researching this at Carleton University, discovered something fascinating. Procrastination is almost never about the task itself. It's an emotion regulation problem. When you put something off, you're not avoiding the work, you're avoiding the feeling you anticipate having while doing the work. Fear of starting imperfectly. Anxiety about not measuring up. The discomfort of being a beginner again. This is why scrolling your phone feels so much better than starting that project. It's not that the project is harder, it's that scrolling doesn't make you feel inadequate. Now, self-doubt and fear of failure, these two always travel together, and they've gotten terrifyingly good at their job in 2025. Why? Because we're living in the age of curated perfection. Every time you open Instagram, LinkedIn, or TikTok, you're watching highlight reels while living behind the scenes. A recent study published in the Journal of Social and Clinical Psychology found that even just 30 minutes per day on social media significantly increases feelings of inadequacy and comparison anxiety. Your brain doesn't distinguish between this is their best moment and this is their normal. It just registers. Everyone else is succeeding. I'm falling behind. Maybe I'm not capable of this. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is the turn nobody expects. These giants aren't actually trying to destroy you. They're trying to protect you. Self-doubt evolved to keep you from taking risks that might get you ostracized from the tribe. Fear of failure is an ancient survival mechanism designed to prevent potentially dangerous mistakes. Even procrastination serves a function. It's your psyche's way of saying, I don't feel safe doing this right now. The problem? These protective mechanisms calibrated for a world where social rejection meant death and physical failure meant getting eaten by a predator. They haven't updated their software for 2025, where the danger is just someone not liking your LinkedIn post. The hidden weakness. So, if these giants are so sophisticated, so deeply wired into our psychology, how do we possibly win? The answer is going to sound almost too simple, but stay with me because there's a twist. You need to find their weakness. And conveniently, they all share the same one. Giants are powerful, but they're not agile. They can't handle small, unexpected moves. Think about the original David and Goliath story for a moment. David won because he refused to fight on Goliath's terms. Everyone expected him to put on armor and engage in close combat. Instead, he stayed at a distance and used a weapon the giant never anticipated. He didn't try to be stronger. He changed the entire nature of the fight. This is where every productivity guru gets it wrong. They tell you to eat the frog or just do it or use the Pomodoro technique. These strategies assume you need to go toe-to-toe with your giants using willpower and discipline. But that's fighting on their terms. And you'll lose every time because they're bigger and stronger than you in that arena. Here's the actual strategy, backed by recent research from Stanford's Behavior Design Lab. You need to make the task so small that your giant can't even see it. Dr. B.J. Fogg calls these tiny habits actions so minimal they slide under your psychological defenses before they can activate. Instead of I need to write my novel, it's I'll write one sentence. Instead of I have to get in shape, it's I'll do one push-up. Your self-doubt can't mobilize its full force against one sentence. Your procrastination can't justify avoiding one push-up. The giants are designed for big battles. They're vulnerable to tiny, consistent attacks. But here's the twist I promised. These tiny actions aren't actually about the action itself. They're about something far more strategic. Every time you complete a tiny action, you're generating evidence that contradicts your giant's core narrative. Self-doubt says you can't do this. One sentence proves, I just did. Procrastination says you're the kind of person who puts things off. One push-up proves, not this. Time, each small action is a data point that slowly rewrites the story you believe about yourself. Research from the European Journal of Social Psychology shows it takes an average of 66 days to form a new habit. But this is crucial only if you're consistent, not perfect. Missing one day doesn't reset the process. This is the part that demolishes the perfection trap. Your giant wants you to believe that if you can't do it perfectly, you shouldn't do it at all. But progress isn't linear, and consistency beats intensity every single time. Building sustainable armor. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. This sounds great in theory, but I've tried small steps before and eventually I just stop. You're right. And there's a reason for that. Most people focus entirely on offensive strategy, how to attack their giants without building any defensive armor. They change their actions without changing their environment or their identity, and eventually, the giants regroup and counterattack. So let's talk about building armor that actually lasts. First piece, intentionality over impulse. In 2025, we're living in what addiction researchers call a hyperstimulating environment. Your phone is engineered by some of the smartest psychologists in the world to hijack your attention. Every app is optimized for engagement, which is just a corporate word for addiction. According to a 2024 report from the Center for Humane Technology, the average person makes over 200 decisions per day just about their phone usage, and 90% of those decisions are unconscious. Your giants love this because impulsivity is their home turf. The solution isn't willpower, it's intentional friction. Make the bad habits harder and the good habits easier. Want to stop scrolling at night? Put your phone in another room. Want to write more? Put your notebook on your pillow so you see it before bed. These aren't big dramatic changes, but they shift the default, and humans are default-driven creatures. Second piece, the feedback loop revolution. Here's something most people get backwards. They avoid feedback because they're afraid of criticism. But criticism isn't your enemy, ignorance is. Every time you avoid getting feedback, you're letting your giants tell you stories about what other people think instead of finding out the truth. A landmark study from Harvard Business School found that people who actively sought critical feedback advanced in their careers 40% faster than those who didn't. Not because they were more talented, because they corrected course faster. Your giants want you isolated with your assumptions. Real feedback breaks the isolation. Third piece, and this one might be the most important, the community catalyst. There's overwhelming research showing that behavior change is contagious. The Framingham Heart Study tracked thousands of people over decades and found that if your friend becomes obese, your risk increases by 57%. If your friend quits smoking, you're 36% more likely to quit. The giants in your life are influenced by the giants in other people's lives. This is why finding your community isn't just nice, it's strategic. When you surround yourself with people who are actively fighting their own giants, you're not just getting support. You're borrowing their victories as evidence for your own possibilities. You're seeing proof that the giants can be beaten. The ongoing conquest. So let me bring this all together, because we're not ending this with some generic "you've got this" motivational speech. You deserve better than that. The giants we've talked about today: procrastination, self-doubt, fear of failure, the perfection trap, they're not going away. And anyone who tells you they can be permanently defeated is lying to you. These are part of the human psychological landscape. They evolved with us for good reasons, even if those reasons are outdated. But here's what changes your relationship with them. When you start seeing these giants clearly, when you understand they're not character flaws but outdated protective mechanisms, something shifts. You stop fighting a war against yourself and start fighting a war against patterns that no longer serve you. You stop asking "what's wrong with me?" and start asking "what strategy will work here?" Success isn't reaching some mythical destination where you've conquered all your demons and life is smooth sailing. That's another story the perfection trap tells. Real success is building the capacity to recognize when a giant appears, understand what it's actually protecting you from, and deploy the right strategy to move forward anyway. Every giant you face is preparation for the next one. And here's the beautiful part: they get easier to spot. The pattern recognition improves. The strategies become more intuitive. Not because you become perfect, but because you become practiced. The person watching this video right now who's been putting off that project, doubting that decision, or trapped in perfectionism, you're not broken. You're not uniquely flawed. You're just human, facing the same ancient battles every other human faces. But with modern complications, those ancient instincts weren't designed for. The difference between people who seem to have it all together and people who feel perpetually stuck isn't talent or willpower or some secret knowledge. It's this: the people who move forward have learned to identify their giants, respect their power, and refuse to fight on the giant's terms. You already have everything you need to win this battle. The sling, the stone, the strategy, it's all there. You just needed to know where to aim. So, here's my question for you. Which giant are you going to name first? Drop it in the comments, because naming it is the first step to unmasking it. And if this resonated with you, share it with someone who's fighting their own giants, because, as we learned, community isn't optional in this fight. The giants within are formidable. But you, my friend, are surprisingly dangerous when you know where to throw the stones. Now go unmask your Goliath.